Welcome. In this series of videos, we're going to be going through how to install the PNM sensor for Cisco XDR Analytics. We used to call XDR Analytics, we used to call it Secure Cloud Analytics. In fact, if you look at the documentation here, you can still see that we're still calling it that inside the documentation, but it's been renamed to Cisco XDR Analytics. And when I'm referring to the PNM sensor, the PNM stands for Private Network Monitoring. That's the device inside of your network where you're going to be sending premise-based net flow. So from your routers and switches and firewalls, we call those exporters. So we're going to be sending that net flow or IPFix or ENSOL telemetry, depending on which appliance we're talking about, to the PNM sensor to get it compiled and ultimately sent on up into the cloud, what we also call the XDR data lake. Now, what is the PNM sensor? From a practical perspective, it's actually just an Ubuntu ISO that you're going to download, and you can actually run it on just about anything. In fact, here's where you found it. If you're in your cloud portal, it looks like this. Over here on the right, with the little circle with the question mark, hit the down arrow. On-premise sensor install. Go ahead and click that, and there it is. It's ONA 20.04.1. You recognize that as a long-term release of Ubuntu, and that's actually what is. And the ONA stands for Observable Network Appliance. We used to call it that. We're now calling it the Private Network Monitoring Sensor, though. And you can run this virtually inside of VMware or any side of or anything that can actually do a virtual image, or you can run it on a physical appliance. I've actually gotten this thing up and running on a Raspberry Pi. It's that simple to install, and the requirements are that modest in order to be able to install this. And I don't recommend that you actually use a Raspberry Pi for production, but it's just something I wanted to see I could do. I may make a video of that later on. So what are those basic requirements? Let's go ahead and look in this documentation, and I'm going to scroll down here. We're going to find out what those virtual machine requirements are. So let's scroll through here. It's right here at the beginning, and there it is. These are the minimum requirements to get this up and running. 2 gigs of RAM, 2 CPU cores, 32 gigs of storage space. Now, you can actually increase that. Right here, there's a white paper. So you follow this link, go to the white paper, boom, click on that guy, and let's open it up. And it talks about the PNM sensor, private network monitoring. That's all your premise-based telemetry, as we said. Scroll down. We're not going to talk about that, but here we go. The different sensor configs. So with the 2 CPUs, 2 gigs RAM, and 32 gig hard drive space, you're going to be able to consume 80,000 flows per second. That's actually quite a lot. But if you're in a larger environment, you can modestly increase this to 3 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and the hard drive space doesn't change. So what does that tell you? Actually, you can just do this one installation. If you need to increase its capacity, just give it a little bit more resources. But then look at this. If you want to go, it can go up to as high as 523,000 flows per second, but you have to have a huge increase in RAM. So what does that tell you? Yeah, just make another one of these instead, and you're going to do a much better because and that still gives you a lot less. So yeah, if you have to go over 520, let's make another sensor, and we'll use 3, 8, and 32 instead. Now, what's also nice about these is that since they're so low in their such modest requirements, that we can deploy them wherever you need them. And I always tell people, if you have a device or a large network in another area, you don't want to actually send all that telemetry back to, say, in your data center, like hosting this in just your data center, and that span the WAN in order to be able to send NetFlow telemetry through your IPsec tunnel or something like that all the way back to your data center and then send it to the cloud. Just build another one over there. Now, that connection up into the cloud, they talk a little bit about it in some of these documents, but it's a TLS 1.2 connection up into the cloud, so it's all secured, and it's secured at rest inside the AWS cloud as well. So let's get to it. Here I am. I've got my ISO. I put it inside of a virtual environment, and it's popping up, and it looks an awful lot like a regular Ubuntu Linux install, because that's pretty much what it is. Let's go ahead and run it. Boom, English. Yep, I speak English. Install the ONA using DHCP or static. Now, you're going to want to use static, obviously. You don't want this address to be changing on you. That's kind of a holdover from the original Ubuntu install, so make sure you give your PNM sensor a static IP address. Yep, and English, and I am in the United States. Nope, I don't want you to try and detect it. Yes, English US. And here we go. One of the things that's nice about this is once you have it up and running, if you create it in a virtual environment, then you can actually make a copy of that and deploy it somewhere else with just a few relative changes to ID names and stuff like that. I'll show you a little bit about how to do that kind of a thing later on. Okay, here's we're going to put in our IP address. This is my lab environment, so it's going to be 192.168.45. This is going to be 250. It's smart enough to know that that's a Class C with a 24 there, so let's go ahead and hit continue. And that is my gateway, 192.168.45.1. But that is not my name server. Name server is going to be, my DNS server is going to be 45.100. But if you're looking at this, it looks an awful lot, like I said, of a standard Ubuntu LTS installation. LTS, for you non-Linux speaking people, long-term support. Domain name is going to be example.com. That's about as generic as we need to be. Full name of a new user. So pick something that's going to be usable by you. In my particular case, I'm just going to say the PNM admin. Yep, that's the username for that account. And then I got to choose a password. This, of course, you want it to be adequately complex. I mean, if we're going to be network security people, then we actually need to practice what we play. So you need to make something with a lot of digits in here. But this is my lab, so I'm not going to go too crazy with it. In the real world, I would make something very long and complex. And it's going to reach out for time. And it's reaching out to the Ubuntu time servers that are programmed in by default, but you can of course update this as you see fit for your particular environment, point it to your NTP servers on the inside, once this is up and running. I am in the central time zone. Yep, let's just use the entire setup. Good enough. Right changes? Yes, we do. That's the full thing. I said you only can use, it only had to use 32. I added a little bit more resources in here because I'm going to do some demonstrations of other things later on. Like I said, this is just Ubuntu, and that means you can add other types of applications to it as well. And one of the ones I like to add is BPY top. It's kind of a nice one that shows how much utilization we're doing, how much traffic's going to and from the device. Otherwise, it's just going to, you would have to do all that by the command line. It's just a nice little GUI. So we're going to add that later. So I've added in a few extra resources beyond the two CPUs, 2 gigs of memory, and 32 gigs of hard drive space. I've added a little extra hard drive space, 2 extra CPUs, and doubled the memory for this one. That way I can make sure that my device has sufficient for its primary job of sending that telemetry up into the XDR data lake, but still gives me some of the other extra features that I want to use. When this screen pops up, it's looking for the proxy. So this is the proxy setting for basically Ubuntu reaching up into the cloud. It does not have anything to do with the PNM sensor reaching in to send the telemetry up to the XDR data lake. That's actually going to be associated with the XDR application that's installed on here too. So if you have a proxy inside of your environment and you fill this out and then you find you have reachability, it's because there is a proxy configuration inside of the inside the PNM sensor that is specific just for sending telemetry up to the cloud. We'll cover that in another video as well, but this particular one here is just talking about Ubuntu generally reaching out into the internet. So I paused that a little bit because we didn't want to sit there watching the video of this just doing its installation. You can do what you want here, install security updates automatically. I'm going to say no automatic updates because I want to be able to create a video on this talking about automatic updates later on as well, specifically for Ubuntu and also specifically for the PNM sensor itself. As I'm sitting here thinking about this, I don't think I mentioned you only need one interface. The control interface and the telemetry receiving interface could just be the same one. You can add a second one if you're gonna. You can also span traffic over to this device, and it will convert all the span traffic into NetFlow telemetry and send that up into the data lake as well. You can actually do things that way if you want to. And there's actually a couple extra cool things that we'll talk about probably in the next video when it comes to spanning things over to it. It actually runs a few extra processes and gives you a little additional information beyond the traditional NetFlow telemetry gives us. So spanning in some areas is actually a really good idea, but if it's just NetFlow you're sending, then you only need the one interface. And yes, by all means, we do need to put the grub loader on there. Okay, installation is complete. We need to reboot. Let's go ahead and do that. And that's it. It's actually up and running. Now, it's not set up to receive telemetry yet. We haven't done that. It's not actually connected to your XDR data lake yet. We haven't done that piece. We're going to do that in the next video. This was just to get the basics of it up and running at this time. So we're good to go at this point. And this can be the end of the video.